Hello, I'm going to introduce you to Silex and RedBean. We're going to start from square one. So, if there's mistakes, that's just part of filming a video from beginning to end. Silex, if you don't know it, is a micro framework. It's based on Symfony 2 components. RedBean is an ORM, and it's slightly different from ORMs such as Doctrine. And all an ORM is it's an object relationship mapper or manager. And RedBean does things a little bit differently. It kind of creates schemas out of nothing, just based off of what you're giving your objects. We'll get into more of that later. So the first thing, you can see that nothing is in the directory. I just created a Silex RedBean intro directory. The first thing I'm going to do is require in Silex. Composer, if you just type in composer require, if you're not sure what the package name is, it's going to ask you for the package name. Then type Silex, and then it'll give you kind of like a search page. So we're going to choose Silex/Silex for the required package, and enter again for the latest version. So my IDE is PHP Storm, and what this composer command is doing, if we just enter out, it's going to create our composer.json for us, and then it's going to actually install what it needs to for the packages. So we see here's the composer.json file that it created. So it's requiring in Silex version 1.3, and then it created our vendor folder as well with our autoloader, and that's what we're going to be using throughout this example. The only other thing that I'm going to want to search for is a RedBean provider. Oops. I'll do composer require, search for RedBean. So the RedBean provider is going to allow Silex to bring RedBean in. So I'm going to use, I'm not finding it here. So I'm going to just search for that. Again, it's RedBean service providers. It's iVolba. Oh, you know what? It's number 13. But we're doing it live. And sometimes it takes a while to connect. If you haven't connected to it before, it's going to download from the GitHub library first, and then it'll store it locally through cache. I actually haven't used the RedBean service provider, so this will be kind of new to me. I've used RedBean before, but not with Silex. And if you're new to Silex, the documentation is really verbose. Just go into your documentation, click on providers if you want to learn more about providers, and you can understand exactly what a provider is, kind of what happens with it. Again, all a provider does is it allows you to use a service or an object really, and use the different methods and stuff within that object. So we'll be able to basically use everything within RedBean through Silex by calling the RedBean object. Okay, so I think we have everything just for a real simple tutorial here. There's that RedBean provider coming in. I'm not going to organize anything. We're just going to do it real simple. So I'm just going to create an index.php file. And then we're going to create our application. So we're going to instantiate the Silex application object. Oops. There it is. We're not passing anything through to it. In Silex's example for this, it's just a simple hello world. So if we go to their introduction page, they actually have, this is what your hello world should look like. So if we copy this, I'll explain line by line. But basically, almost line by line. So require ones, they're, again, it's a variable that PHP has, and it just references the current directory that you're in. It doesn't have the directory slash after it, so that's why there's a slash here. So this directory would actually be my sites, just sites slash Silex dash RedBean dash intro folder, and I'm referencing vendor, then autoload, because we need that autoloader so we can access all of these good items. Under app, we're creating our application, we're instantiating the object. So with micro frameworks, we want to define routes. So here on line 6, we're defining that anything that goes to /hello, we're going to go to this route, and more specifically, anything that has a GET request to /hello. Posts, puts, they're not gonna go through that route, and I'll demonstrate that here right now. First, so PHP has another cool feature. I have PHP version 5.5, so if I just type in PHP -S localhost 8000, it actually has a built-in web server now running on localhost port 8000. So in the web browser, we go port 8000, and well, we get a we get a wrong message. We get a 404, and actually that's because we don't have any route defined there. If we go to /hello, we get a 404 again. Okay, there's hello Chris. So the 404 was there because we didn't pass in a variable. So let's go back to the code. So we're calling this route. We're doing a GET request to hello and then name, and what this just means that it's a placeholder. We're going to be passing through a variable of name through here, and these are closures. You can read more about that on. You know what? I'm just going to jump to the Silex documentation. The routes that confused me for a second. Just trying to understand like micro frameworks, because a lot of times, like in a full-fledged framework, the routes are just done based off the controller. So based off like the controller's methods and what the names are, and then the routes just kind of happen automatically. Micro frameworks are more specific, I guess. So I'm just trying to find out where they set the routes. I think it's in usage. But all that you have to really remember is that you have to define each route, and it can get messy on a larger application, but when you get to that point, we can talk about how to organize your routes and stuff like that. So the most important thing is that we're passing through a variable through to this function, and this use command is actually going to allow us to use the application variable inside of our closure, because otherwise we wouldn't have access to it. If we just pass that, it actually thinks that's undefined. It doesn't know that variable is there. So we're going to say use the app variable that we defined up here. And then again, we're just going to return a hello, and then we're going to escape the name and return the name. So that's why back here we see hello Chris. Again, I'm just finding routing. Okay, yeah, so there's a whole section under usage on routing about the different options and how you could pass through the different parameters or iterate over stuff that you pass through. Most of that stuff, once it gets more and more complicated, you're probably going to have some type of abstract controller maybe handling the routing, or abstract router handling kind of what to do with that stuff. Okay, so I mentioned before that this is a GET request. So I'm just going to copy it, and we're going to see what a post request looks like. So we're just going to call it /post. We're not gonna pass anything. I don't think we're gonna pass anything through to it. And actually, what I just want to do, I'm just gonna put in the good old var dump. So we're just gonna var dump out the apps. Looks like it's not a request. Let me look at the documentation real quick. You know what? Let's just dump out the app. I'm just curious at what's in there. I never have it. I mean, I haven't really paid attention to that. So we're gonna dump out the app. Now, when we go through here again, this is making a GET request, so we're not gonna be able to access anything or even view the source on what our post request would be. So I have in Google Chrome, I have an app, and there's apps like this for Firefox. This one's called Postman. So you can do any type of web request. This is helpful for troubleshooting APIs and all the stuff. So we just type in localhost 8000. Again, if we type in hello Chris, we send it off. We're gonna see it return hello Chris here, or hello Chris 5000, which sounds pretty cool. But we can switch the request here, the request type that we're actually sending. So if we switch it to a post, and let's just go to our post again route, Chris 5000. This looks like a bunch of errors. So if we click preview, oh, that's actually the error for our application. So the interesting thing about this error is that if we remove the variable, it goes through, which is actually exactly what we told it to do. Let me open up here. We told it to only pay attention to /post. We didn't tell it that there was going to be any variables. That's why it errored out. So if we look at the pretty version of this, we'll actually see the Silex application and all the different things that come with it, providers and controllers and everything that's defined there. So if we do want a variable, however, we could do the same thing. Post name, we're just gonna pass name through, and then let's just do var dump on the name. So we'll do the Chris 9000 now. So we see a var dump, and then we see, oops, looks like there's something that went wrong. It's basically because Silex is expecting that there's supposed to be a response coming back. So since we don't have a response, we're just var dumping. That's why it went wrong. So let me do something a little bit different then, because you know what? Let me look that up first. I don't think that we could define. Yeah, we cannot define like get and post in the same thing. But we could define. The only way that we could do that is defining get hello name, post hello name. So those would run two separate operations. So I'll just do return posting plus the name. I'm not going to escape it. This is very bad. You should escape it. Everything. Okay, so this route is no longer going to work. We get a 404 here in our status. So if we switch it to a hello, we're going to get posting. And if we switch our request to get, we're going to get hello. So that'll come in a little bit useful once we actually integrate with RedBean. So, okay, we have our application. The next thing is to register our provider. So the provider is usually, you need to instantiate the provider name. So let's just look for RedBean. So there it is, RedBean service provider. And let me go through the documentation because I've never used this before. Okay, so we define DB options. Or we pass through, okay, the DSN user password and frozen stuff. So we're just going to pass through this array. Oops. So what this is going to tell our provider is use SQLite, and we're going to change this path to our relative path. So we're just going to say use what directory we're in except go go up one, go to data, and then use db SQLite. So we're just going to create a data folder. New directory, data. Not passing anything else because we don't need to. It's SQLite. So SQLite is just a file-based system. You'll have to make sure that you have SQLite installed, which I do, and I can show you in a different video how to install that stuff. The other thing I wanted to mention is in your IDE, or if you ever want to dig into this code to like just kind of see how it works, and this is useful for troubleshooting. You can always just control click on the provider that you're going into. Otherwise, just go into the vendor directory, look for the name, iVolba, RedBean service provider. It's going to be under source, and then the RedBean service provider. These service providers, don't get too concerned about like what it's implementing or what it's using and stuff like that. Just look at kind of what it's doing. So, this is again, it's just creating appdb. So it's passing through in our application. It's creating appdb, and it's going to have that use the options that we pass through, and then set up RedBean. So if we wanted it to be frozen or not, it looks like we could just set part of the array that's coming in for the options as frozen. So here, you could set. Let me just change this so it makes a little bit more sense. You could set this to frozen. We're just going to say false for now because we can't have it. But this will at least remind us to set it for true if we're going to use it in production. So here's our application that's registered. The other thing that I noticed that was answered for me just by looking through this was it is actually using the RedBean facade here as R. So it does R setup, and I noticed that RedBean was included here. So RedBean is included. You don't have to include it yourself if you went through Composer to load it in. Okay, so don't be afraid of digging through source code. That's one thing that held me back from understanding probably more than I should have. But alright, so we jump back to here. We registered. Yeah, let's just run it and see if it works. Still works, and we don't have any errors, so that's pretty cool. We didn't really do anything though. We didn't tell it to create anything or use RedBean to save anything, so let's try doing that. So again, init RedBean, calling appdb. Then you can access your configured facade. Okay, so let's just try doing that. We're going to try doing it outside of Silex again, just to try understanding if it works or not. And actually I'm going to go to RedBean's documentation and see how we can just create a bean, so to speak. Okay, so R dispense book, and then store the book. So we're gonna actually just dispense beer. Sounds better than a book. Dispense beer, and then give it a proper name here. Then we're going to give beer a name called Sugar Creek Ale, and give beer a rating. Cool. 11. And then we're going to use RedBean to store that bean, or the beer, whichever one you want. Alright, let's just see if that works. And we should actually be able to pass through nothing. I'm going to check my terminal, see what's happening, and it blows up because we can't because we have to use the facade. So it's blowing up because we need to. There is no such thing as R. I mean, the IDE knows what it is, but we have to use say use RedBean. Oops, not RedBean. RedBean facade as R. Try it again. Check our terminal. It's still blowing up because it cannot call dispense on a non-object. Create a new bean, which is a book, and store the book. I think it's because I'm gonna say it's because we actually don't have anything created. We don't have the database file. So let me close out of this. In SQLite, actually, you know what? I'm gonna have to look up on SQLite how to create a schema. I'm pretty sure it's the same as anything else. So I'm just gonna go to the data folder and create db.sqlite. Oh, you know what? I don't think I have SQLite installed on here, and I was just mentioning that that's required. So the first thing I'm going to install is PHP 5's SQLite adapter. And then install SQLite. SQLite 3 to be specific, and that's good. And it's only 165K, that's pretty cool. I'm just going to see if PHP will create that file for me. Okay, so it still can't dispense, and it's actually not creating the data file, so I'm just gonna exit out, go into the data directory, and then try generating the SQLite file through here, which I believe it did right there, just by typing that. Let's see, no, okay. So I'll go to SQLite's documentation for creating a schema. You know, because I don't actually remember if RedBean creates the entire schema or not. It must not. So let's go to SQLite and let's create a basic schema. Okay, for example, you get the SQLite command and then just create a basic schema, which we'll call Silex. Oops. Let's exit. Oops, sorry. We have to quit. Call SQLite 3 and then Silex. There it is. I don't know why I was going to cat that. Now let's see if we can actually get anything. Nothing, because this is not running. Still nothing to dispense on beer, but we have a Silex database created. Oops, let's create that in a new tab. So go to data, SQLite. And unfortunately I don't know enough SQL to be able to know what I'm doing. You know, let's just do help schema Silex. Doesn't show anything. Okay. Create table beer. We'll just pass through name for that for the table. And then let's quit. Call member function dispense with non-object. So it's trying to dispense an object. You know what? I might be doing this wrong. So let me just go to RedBean's documentation. I just want to see how we actually connect up and create something. So it says it'll create a table called post for you, which it should do, and add a column called title after we store it. It's not doing that because we're not calling something correctly. You know what? I think it's because we're not using app. I bet you that's it. So we have to do app db dispense. Remember how we set up that service provider? Well, we have to do the service provider, kind of use that for everything, because again, we're passing through the parameters through the service provider. So if you figured that out before I did, good on you. And then let's just see what the error is. If there's an error, it's called a member function again. Okay, line 15, something else is happening on index. So it's okay. Still having the same problem. But this is better because we're airing out. Let's just see if we have the options all set correctly. We have our DB SQLite database there. Init RedBean with calling app db. Okay, so this provider, I don't think sets it up. That wouldn't make sense. Yeah, this doesn't make sense. So let's do it this way. Let's var dump out app db and see what we get, and then let's just die right after it. So we get null, so there is definitely something going wrong with his with the options being passed through for SQLite. And let me just check their example for SQLite. So they pass through. Oh, you know what? It might be because we're passing through that directory variable if the DSN looks for something specific. So I'll go to RedBean's documentation. Oh, we can actually create the database just by running our setup. So let's just look at this data provider again. Our setup passes through these options if they exist. So let's remove the DSN option and see what we get. Still null. That might not be a bad thing though. But we don't get an error because it dies before then. So let's then just die after it dispenses and see if we still get that dispense error. Which we do. Okay, so let's go to See if we could just remove that frozen and everything. We still don't get anything new. That's kind of interesting. So the provider is supposed to make it easy for us to pass through options and register the app within the namespace, but it doesn't appear to be. So what I'm going to do is just start using the RedBean adapter throughout, just to see if we can get this puppy to work. So we'll run our setup ourselves. Let's remove that just for grins, and then let's just change this to R dump or R, and then we'll var dump that. So R dispense beer, die, var beer, var dump beer. Okay, so we have a RedBean object. There's something strange going on with that then. So let me just remove that. I'm going to that's really frustrating, and sometimes, like, when this happens, you really have to dig through the code, or at least dig through forums to figure out why it's happening. Because looking at this, I mean, we're doing the same thing here. So what I typically do in a case like this, I don't not use it, and it's kind of like a programmer's dilemma, because you have to, you have to use the tools and you have to use them in the right way. So I'm just gonna spend time doing that, and you can always skip ahead on the video to see, what the end result is, or see the code. So I'll be committing this code to GitHub once I'm done. So there's a die after that, so we're just gonna var dump the beer by doing appdb. Okay, so register is supposed to call this RedBean provider. Supposed to. So what we could do is just die and say hello. And if we see that, we know that we're there. There's a lot better ways to, like, troubleshoot this with, like, xdebug and stuff like that, but for the sake of, I guess, beginnerness, we're just going to die and var dump and use all those tools for us. So now we're calling share, and we're calling R setup. So what I want to do is actually just var dump out R, what was it, dispense, and we're just going to dispense beer. So we'll var dump that, and then we'll die, and we'll see if we actually have something. Which we do. That's amazing. How do we have something, but we don't have it? We don't have it elsewhere. So we're actually, appdb should have our setup. Okay. So this is actually registering the service provider. So let's just see if we can var dump out appdb. Die. And we get null. Okay, so appdb dispense beer. And we get nothing. We get a big old fat error. Yeah. Call to member dispense on non-object line 7. Huh. Okay. appdb. Because I don't know why it says in the documentation to do that. Another thing too is when you're looking through stuff to try figuring out how it's working, so you can always look through the tests to see what's going on. So this test apparently tests to see if it's registered, which it is. DB options DSN has the same as this one that they're passing through. Test DB, register new RedBean service provider, DSN, DB init. Okay, so we do need to call appdb. That was part of the problem. So this needs to be called. New application register, the service provider, and then appdb, and then we're going to, oh, we still use the facade. That's interesting. So that's probably what I was doing wrong. That's kind of weird. I don't know what. Huh. Okay. So we don't do appdb like I thought we would do. We just do R. We just reference RedBean. That doesn't make sense for some reason. So we need that use statement up here again. RedBean facade as R. Again, we're just aliasing RedBean facade, which exists in the vendor folder RedBean. Here, we'll go to it here. It exists all the way here. So we're just basically creating an alias, to that file. And we're just going to call it R. So, okay. Now we get a RedBean object. Well, that's just kind of weird. I don't really like that provider, because it doesn't really do anything for you. I mean, it sets it up, but it doesn't call any of the methods beyond it. So, and that needs to be called anyway. You know what? Mistakes happen. So we're just going to get rid of that provider and just use RedBean, because RedBean. And this is a really simple app as well. I mean, it could be improved. You're supposed to have this stuff kind of moved out and everything, but I'm not going to worry about that now. Okay. So what we're doing, we're going to save some beer. Store some beer. Store beer. Alright, so this should store it temporarily. I think, somewhere. It's going to give us an error because, you know, it's 404ing. It's doing this. It's not erroring out on any of this. It's erroring out because it doesn't have a route. I don't know where it actually stores the temporary file. So let me just go here. And, okay. It stores it in the temp directory. So what we can do, just so we don't, like, lose information. Again, I was thinking of not doing it in a temporary file because I wanted to use the provider, and then when the provider wasn't working, I figured just use the temporary file. But now that we realized that the provider is just shit, we're just going to go back to SQLite. Like we were going to. And again, we should be able to, use the directory variable and say use data db SQLite. And I'm gonna delete that file because I am pretty sure that it creates a SQLite file for us. We'll find out. No error. And it created the freaking SQLite file for us. That's amazing. I don't actually know if PHP Storm can open this. I can't. That'd be so cool. Alright, so it stored beer for us, and I can tell that because if we actually just change this to beer name, for instance, and I'll change this one to beer as well. So we're going to pass through a beer name. And then we're going to use app and also use, let's put this into a variable. We can also use the DB. So we're going to pass through database as well. So then we could do things like dispense and all that good stuff through here. Let's see. Okay, so what we want to do is dispense beer. That's going to be, we're going to call it beer. And then beer name is going to be equal to whatever name we're passing through. Since we're using an ORM, we're not going to worry about things such as escaping and stuff like that, and just it's a simple test as well. You really want to, like, in an actual app, in a regular application, full-fledged. So please escape all your things, but since we're using this application is going to go nowhere, so don't escape if you don't want to. I don't know what I'm talking about. Escape your stuff, validate your stuff, all that good stuff. Alright, so we're going to then db store beer. So we're going to try storing beer into our application. We're going to then just return back saying, hey, I stored your beer named, and then we're going to pass back the name, but we're going to pass it back through the database. So db, something's wrong here. We're setting up the instance. Apparently, I don't know if we actually have to pass that through. I think we just do R, because it should be, I don't know how RedBean stores that stuff. It must be global. Something nasty, maybe, I don't know. Some tight couple ORM, but that's cool. Demo. Alright, then we're going to get, I forget, an ID. Set up, store your bean, get the ID. Okay. Hey, I stored your beer name under ID. ID. Cool. Make link, stuff like that, a little bit fancier. So then if we, oops, sorry. You know what, this is supposed to be post, and this is supposed to be get. Because it'd be kind of silly if we were trying to get a name and it's not actually working. So we're going to get the beer ID now. So get, we're looking for ID, this app, and then we're just going to say beer equals our load. So load the post that I just saved. Okay. Load beer, pass through ID, and then return plus the name, beer name. Okay, so let's see if this works. So we're going to open up Postman again, and we're going to post beer. Oops. Sugar Creek Ale. Hey, I stored your beer under name or under ID 2. So that's cool. So let's do a get for beer 2. Sugar Creek Ale. That's pretty freaking sweet, man. Beer 1. Sugar Creek Ale. Apparently we like Sugar Creek Ale. Let's do beer 3, see what happens. Okay, so nothing happened. Well, something did happen, but I couldn't find it, so obviously you'd want to handle that. You'd want to be like, you know, throw an exception if it doesn't exist. I don't know why 1 is Sugar Creek Ale as well, but let's just make something different by calling the post again, except we're going to call it Baby Bell. Okay, number 3. Now beer 3. Baby Bell. Okay. So what happens then if we just try saying get Sugar Creek Ale? Nothing. Okay. But we actually don't probably want that to happen. And when we define our routes, we can define like what we're actually expecting to be passed through. And here's an example of, well, dynamic routing specifically, but also if the ID is not set, what you do. So we can actually set that up as well right now. So if not set ID, Then we're going to just say I'm thirsty. That's done. Thirsty, but couldn't find beer. I don't know why I'm saying like that. I think I should, yeah, I need to say Applebort. So the reason why I need to say Applebort is because it'll actually handle then a 404. We can pass through 404 through here. So not found. So we can put whatever message we want after it and whatever headers we want, but we want to be able to say, you know, 404 not found. This will actually allow us to build out like an API in the future, if you will. The other thing we want to do is check to make sure that it is a number, and there's a specific way to do that through Silex. We could convert to an int. Here it is, assert. So right after our app definition, so down here right between the semicolon, we're going to call assert. So assert that our ID is a is digits only. So it's a regex verifier. So again, post ID digits only, and you can look up all the regex stuff to figure that out. We can make it a specific match. You know, make sure that this is only Chris or whatever. Which wouldn't necessarily be good on security wise, but I'm just saying you can use regex or any variation. You can use alphabetical alphabets or A through Z, or make sure it's only lowercase a through Z, or no spaces or some spaces, stuff like that. So now what happens is if we go here, let's go to beer. If we do beer like A, we're gonna get a 405. So what's a 405? It might look easier in Postman. So again, we'll just send this one, get that. Our 405 is method not allowed. So we actually get a return back saying method not allowed. We're trying to do something we shouldn't be. We're sending characters. So we do get 1. Okay, 200. That's okay. 3. It's 200. That's okay. 4. 200. Oh, you know what? 200 is okay. So we're actually never gonna I don't know if we'll never not hit this is set, but probably not. But what we'll definitely hit is the fact that RedBean can't load the beer. So we want to actually see if first let's just see what the beer looks like if we try loading it in with an ID that doesn't exist. So we'll just var dump out the beer, go back to 5, hit send. Oh, okay, it's an object, which is actually alright. I'm just looking through the object to see if it's null or not. So I'm trying to see how we can get what we can actually get from this. So I think if I just say if empty beer name, and then we're going to echo I'm thirsty but I couldn't find any beer. And actually this message, this 404, I'm going to change to just a generic ID must be set. So now if we go back here, send beer 5. Let me see what's going on. So I'm getting an error. I'm getting a 404 specifically, but the message isn't coming through. I don't know why. This page could not be found. Huh, I don't know why the message isn't going through. And maybe it is, I'm just not seeing it. It could be, sometimes Okay, since we're programming it right now, we're just going to turn debug mode on to true. And you can find this stuff out again in the Silex documentation. There it is. So this actually doesn't echo out unless we throw in an exception handler. But we see, if we turn debug on, we see kind of where errors are thrown. So HTTP exception, because we're throwing abort, saying I'm thirsty but couldn't find beer. So we're throwing abort 404, I'm thirsty but couldn't find beer, index line 18, and then everything else below it is telling you kind of like the path that's going. It called it in a closure, we passed through 5, we passed through 5, and then we're handling a request, and then when we run it is where we get the error. So there you go. It's a working application. You can modify this. We could pass through some links and stuff like that. The only other thing, I think, like the next steps for this application would be to integrate like Twig. So Twig is a templating system. You don't have to, and actually the introduction to this kind of, or even let's see, yeah, the introduction to Silex talks about using Twig quite a bit. But there's also a lot of other examples for like just using PHP and HTML. And what Twig is it's a templating system. It makes it easier for designers and developers to be able to output their information. So like Igor's example here is you have an array of blog posts. You know, you can imagine this is RedBean with our objects or with our rows in there. And then when someone calls get blog, we call RedBean, or in this instance call an array through it. And then we just loop through and we break out. So we could output it this way all the time. It gets messy. Again, here we're looping through with the post title and body on the different blog stuff, but that gets messy, and we really want to like isolate that view logic from our controller logic. So what you want to look into for doing that, before I make a video for that, is it's gonna be. Let me go up here. You're gonna have to go under documentation, providers, and then start looking into the Twig provider, Twig service provider. So this will give you a really great like jump start. Again, they'll call app register. So you register your Twig path, and then when you get on the usage, basically you're going to return app Twig render, and then hello Twig. So hello Twig ends up being your HTML file, and then you pass through the name and stuff to that. So your hello Twig file ends up just being basically HTML with the Twig templating language wrapped around it. So look into Twig and look into service providers, because this code is definitely not ideal. Again, we can move this stuff out, you know, our routes and stuff like that. We can move this out so our application file looks really clean. I'll do that probably in a different video. So for now, I'm just going to wrap up by doing a git init, and then also coming through here, creating a new git init, new ignore file for oops. We'll say that's Symfony. We'll just say generate the file and see what happens. Okay, nothing. So we're just gonna say ignore my idea folder, because that's just all my stuff that's in here for that's like the PHP Storm IDE folder, if you will. We're gonna include the DB SQLite file, just so people have it and know that it exists. And then the other thing that I want to do is actually just create a readme.md. Let me just install plugin because it makes it a little bit easier for markdown language. So I'm going to do Silex and RedBean intro, read. I don't know why I keep doing RedBean. It says I need to restart. We'll do that for a second. Okay, Silex RedBean intro. So follow through on YouTube, post a link there. And then the different resources that I use throughout the video, I'll make available here. So do RedBean. Oops. RedBean Silex. I'm not even gonna include that crap. SQLite. It's helpful. Why not? And then also, I always like to include prerequisites. If I can spell it. If I can't, that's okay. So I'm just gonna say, you know, PHP 5, PHP, so we'll just say PHP, PHP SQLite, and then Composer. Really, I mean that's about it. Okay, and then I'll just commit this and post it on GitHub. So, thanks for watching, and let me know if there's anything I could improve upon, or any other topics that you want me to dive into, kind of on an intro, like introductory to, or like how do you get started video. See ya.